Our staff writer, Chris English, who joins us now on the Newsmaker line, wrote his 53-man roster. And Chris, you created a little bit of buzz with a couple of your picks.
Yeah, definitely. When I was writing it, I think once I got to mainly the tight ends, I knew that was definitely going to ruffle some feathers, and definitely had some people in my mentions on Twitter yesterday and throughout the day today, and then heard some of the callers yesterday that they disagreed with that one.
Well, and you know what? It's funny. Mo, who was on last hour, him and I were texting back and forth some things about writing and about young writers. And Mo says, I always tell young writers, don't worry about people think. You go with your opinion based on the research and everything you've done. And, of course, as Q so eloquently calls the cesspool of Twitter, a cesspool of Twitter, sometimes you get the reaction. And you can't win. You predict a 53-man roster that kind of is in line with everybody else, and everybody says, oh, nice reach there, and then you do some different things and people come after you. But let's run through this a little bit, Chris, and we'll get your comments on it. Obviously, a quarterback, the three guys that we know now are going to be there. Nathan Peterman had his deal restructured this morning, and so he's going to be there. So Carr, Mariota, and Peterman, again, all this talk about John Gruden likes this and does that, and Chris, they stick with three quarterbacks when most people were saying, no, Gruden will only carry two.
Yeah, so from my perspective, going all the way back to when Gruden shocked the entire football community and signed Peterman, from that point forward, he has shown nothing but love to this guy. Like, he is just so infatuated with him. And so just leading up to this point, I was like, there's no way I see Gruden moving on from this guy. And then you move up the ladder one tier to Mariota. And, of course, you have all the people riled up in Raider Nation on Twitter, call them the Twitter GMs, that they're thinking, oh, Mariota's coming for Carr's job and this and that. But then you also look at the contract that he signed. There's no way you're going to get rid of a guy like that. And then, obviously, you have Carr. So from the very beginning, I knew, at least I figured that this was the way they were going to go with three quarterbacks on the roster.
Well, this year, especially with COVID-19, it even makes more sense just because you don't know what could happen anytime, any given time this season. But let me ask you this about Nate Peterman, because a lot of people talk about him and talk about the fact that Gruden has showed him so much love and backed him up and, guaranteed that $1 million for his contract basically today in a restructure. What do you feel like is the end goal when it comes to John Gruden and Nate Peterman?
Ultimately, I think it would be to have him serve as the key backup, because Mariota he's not going to want to be locked into a backup role forever. He wasn't drafted to be that. He got the Titans to the playoffs before and won a game, so he knows that deep down he's not suited to be a backup long term. Whereas you have a guy like Peterman with the trajectory of what he's done with his career, and then you look at the reclamation project and all that. I think the end goal for him would almost be like that Marcus Tuiasosopo role with Rich Gannon.
All right. We're on the phone with Chris English. Of course, he writes for Silver and Black today, and we're going over his 53-man roster. And, Chris, one of the other positions we talked a lot about today, because we talked with Greg Olson about it, was the competitive race at running back. Now, we know the Raiders will carry one fullback in Alec Ingold. That's one you can definitely write in with pen. Then you have Josh Jacob. And the other three running backs, you actually have them carrying 5 total, including the fullback. So 4 running backs. You have Jacobs, Lynn Bowden Jr., of course, Jalen Richard, and Theo Riddick, who I had said early on would win out there. Tell us why 5 backs heading into 2020.
Well, you look at, obviously, the two you mentioned with Jacobs and Ingold, the rookies last year, they were stellar. But then you have a guy like Jalen Richard who re-upped on his contract, 2 years, $7 million. So that, for me, that penciled him in. He was going to be in. And then the wild card, Lynn Bowden Jr., he was the main reason that I've had this team keeping 4 running backs, because he's almost like, I'm sure much of Raider Nation and you guys remember from the Kansas City Chiefs, Dexter McCluster. He reminds me so much of him, where he's almost like a positionless football player because he's such a freak athlete. You don't really know where he's going to line up at. So with that in mind, that's why I had the team keeping Theo Riddick as well. But something I also want to touch on, because I love what Riddick brings to the field, because he's almost like a wide receiver out of the backfield. But, Scott, you brought up yesterday on your guys' show that DeAndre Washington might end up being a cut out there in Kansas City. And if he is cut, I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders bring him back and end up cutting Riddick. But as it stands now, this is the way I see things playing out.
So let me ask you this question. Obviously, earlier at the beginning of the week, Tyrell Williams gets put on IR. His season's over. Most likely his Raiders' career is over as well.
Yep.
So it leaves, not a hole, but it leaves a lot of questions around the wide receiver position. Who sticks, who goes as far as the wide receivers for the Raiders right now?
Yeah, so I see them keeping 7. I know that's kind of a lot to some people, but just given the current circumstances where you don't have your quote-unquote number one guy with what would have been Tyrell Williams, that's obviously it's the next man up mentality, and been hearing nothing but good things coming out of camp from like the vet, Zay Jones, and Derek Carr himself has even tweeted out things about how much he loves Zay Jones, and then I'm super excited to see what the rookies Edwards and Ruggs bring to the table, and then you also have someone like Nelson Aguilar who is really looking to prove it. He was there in Philadelphia, and he wasn't terrible by any means, but he didn't quite live up to those expectations that they were expecting. So a guy like that is going to come in with nothing but motivation, wanting to, continue to climb the ladder. Hunter Renfrow is Mr. Reliable, third and Renfrow. Love that guy in those clutch moments. And then I also have them on the back end of the depth chart, keeping Keelan Doss and Rico Gafford. Those are two guys that will not be shocked at all if they're either practice squad or guys that are cut, if they want to add another offensive lineman or another guy into the defensive backfield. But for me, just with the current situation of not having Tyrell Williams, I saw the team going with 7 wideouts.
Chris English, writer at silverandblacktoday.com, covering the Raiders, is joining us with his 53-man roster prediction. Yeah, the Keelan Doss one was an interesting one to me, but the one that created a buzz yesterday on Twitter amongst Raider Nation, and I've even seen it carry over today, is when we get to the tight end position, which, very deep tight end room. People have talked about it for a while. You have Darren Waller, Foster Moreau, of course, Derek Carrier. You have Jason Witten being cut.
I do. Yeah. So when I looked at this tight end room, they potentially, who knows, maybe they carry a 4th tight end, and a lot of people might be like, well, why don't they just cut Derek Carrier and keep Jason Witten? Well, for me, Carrier he's a reliable blocker. He's an excellent special teams player, and he doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but he's also very, he's he can catch the ball well, as we saw against the Steelers a couple years ago. He had the game-winning catch, a huge catch on that drive. So he's another guy. I love that you could throw him the ball, but when you look at, statistically speaking, Darren Waller, he's Mr. Reliable, played in all 16 games last year, 117 targets, 90 receptions, over 1,000 yards. Then you look at what Witten was able to do in 2019, albeit 38 years old, he could still produce 63 catches. He did only have 4 touchdowns. So I look at what would Witten bring to this team as far as his input in stats, and he would really have to cut into the play of Darren Waller. From my perspective, Waller is so young and already shown how capable he is that I don't really see how that's going to better the team enough to keep a guy like Witten. And then furthermore, you look at the rookie last year, Foster Moreau. He only appeared in 13 games, only caught 13 passes, but he had 13 passes on 21 targets, but he had 5 touchdowns. So he proved that in the red zone, he is more than reliable. So it's almost like, what is really the need for Witten? Obviously, you could talk terms of the X's and O's, and having a guy like a future Hall of Famer in that tight end room to work as a mentor, yeah, that's great. But at the end of the day, you only have 53 roster spots, and you got to make use of them.
Chris, what are your thoughts on the linebacking position? I mean, we know what Corey Littleton's going to do. Nick Witkowski, we know that. They just traded for Raekwon McMillan. But after that, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, so I have the team sticking with the rookie Tanner Muse. I know there was some skepticism coming out in camp of, he looks lost here or he's behind here, but he's just a rookie, so I think there's definitely room to grow. Javin White I have staying. Emmanuel they got out of retirement from the Chargers. As of now, I have them keeping those 6, although just a few hours ago out in the Mile High City, Denver released Todd Davis, a longtime linebacker for them. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some shuffling here where the Raiders go out and sign a vet like that's had proven production and still within the division.
Yeah, good one. And then not really many other surprises you had there. At safety, of course, we talked about what happened today with the release and what's going on there with Demarius Randall. But of course, Abram Harris and Jeff Heath. Jeff Heath, you have there as well, and kind of Dallin Levitt being the odd man out there. But I think Chris, people forget about Jeff Heath. He's not a sexy name, at least for Raider Nation, but he's a solid player. He showed it in Dallas, and clearly they like what they see from him come out of camp.
Yeah, we've heard John Gruden time and time again. He mentioned this with LaMarcus Joyner, where he wants to see better tackling, and I think that's exactly what you're going to get with Jeff Heath. He's someone who you can rely on back there in coverage, but he's also someone that definitely packs a punch, and his style of play, he almost reminds me a little bit of Tyvon Branch. I know that name is well regarded amongst Raiders fans during those down years. Branch was always a guy you could rely on, especially when it came to packing the box and, either covering the tight end or making and completing tackles and not just going in, making an arm tackle and losing the guy. Like Heath is definitely a guy I think that will be able to pack a punch and really help those linebackers out that he'll be behind in coverage.
What are your thoughts on the cornerback position? We know Damon Arnett's going to be a dude. We know Trayvon Mullen's going to be a dude. But then behind that, there's a lot of questions. Amik Robertson's going to be in there at some point. But just the cornerbacks in general.
Yeah, so that's one. There's two emotions I have when I'm looking at this. I'm excited to see what this young group can do, but I am also petrified because you look at the youth that they have, and it's like, that's great. You have all this young talent, but they haven't been there before. You have the second-year guys. I thought they were going to keep Randall, who was going to kind of be a hybrid corner safety, kind of like what Joyner can bring, but he obviously was cut recently. So it's a very young group, but the one aspect that I do like with this group is the speed and athleticism that they're going to bring to the field. And that's one of those things you can't teach speed. You got it or you don't. And certainly in this division, as we're all well aware with guys like Tyreek Hill and company, that's what they bring to the field. And if you don't have speed to stop it, good luck.
Yeah, that's speed. There's no question. I mean, every player to a man remarks about the speed. I don't care if they're playing in the backfield, they're playing at linebacker or on the defensive line. When you talk to those guys, they've continually said, and first thing they've noticed about this squad is the speed. So it'll be interesting. But Chris English, thank you so much for joining us. You can read his stuff up on silverandblacktoday.com. Also, you can follow him at Chris at Sports, right?
Sports with Chris.
Sports with Chris. What am I got? I got it backwards.
Sports with Chris.
At Sports with Chris, and we'll have him on again real soon. Chris, man, thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you real soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
All right, there you go, Q. So that was his. I mean, yeah, he had a couple surprises in there, and you know what? Why not? I mean, look,
right?
We all read the 53-man rosters. Everybody's done them. All of our good friends at the other publications and other media outlets do them too. And I think Chris's logic, you might not agree with it, but it's well thought out, and he knows his stuff, and that's what he came up with.
Right, and when it comes to Jason Witten, that's one that a lot of people were shocked by that he said that. But look, if you look at what the Raiders have been doing with the youth movement that they've been going with, it really wouldn't be a shock, would it?
No, it wouldn't be. I mean, that's the thing, and there could be others as well. We just won't know. Right. Well, we'll know in about a little less than 12 hours, so stay tuned for that. All right, we're going to take